In the small town where dreams often fade like morning mist, Mike Thompson's weathered hands tell the story of countless cars fixed and endless bills barely paid. As a single dad working at Pete's auto shop, he lives by one rule: always do what's right, even when life's got you on the ropes. That's why, on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, he doesn't think twice about helping a paralyzed woman stranded by the curb, her wheelchair struggling against the storm. He's late for work, again, and loses his job, but his conscience is clear. That night, as he tucks his daughter into bed with a heavy heart, neither of them knows that tomorrow will change everything. What happens when genuine kindness meets destiny at a rain-swept corner? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The old Timex alarm clock, a garage sale find from better days, chirped its familiar tune at 5:30 a.m. Mike Thompson's calloused fingers found the well-worn button without opening his eyes. 5 years of the same routine had trained his muscle memory well. The springs in his modest twin bed creaked as he sat up, moonlight still holding court outside his window. "Another day," he whispered to the framed photograph on his nightstand. Catherine's smile, frozen in time, seemed to glow in the pre-dawn light. Even after 6 years, he still found himself reaching across the empty side of the bed some mornings. The floorboards whispered beneath his feet as he navigated the narrow hallway of their small rental house. Each step was carefully placed. Third, board from the left squeaks. Fifth one groans like an old dog. He'd learned the quiet path to avoid waking Sarah before necessary. His daughter needed every minute of sleep she could get. In the kitchen, Mike's morning choreography began. Coffee. First, the ancient Mr. Coffee machine sputtering to life like an asthmatic dragon. 2 pieces of bread in the toaster, eggs from yesterday's grocery store markdown bin, and the last orange split into careful segments. He'd eat at work. Sarah's breakfast came first. The wooden box on top of the refrigerator held their emergency fund, $242 and change. Mike added another $5 from his wallet, wincing at how thin the remaining bills felt. The rent was due next week, and they were still short. But Sarah's school pictures were coming up, and he'd promised her she could get the premium. Package this year, some promises you just had to keep. Daddy? Sarah's voice, still clouded with sleep, drifted from the hallway. Is it morning already? Mike turned, taking in his daughter's appearance. Tangled brown hair, her mother's eyes, and wearing those purple pajamas that were getting too short at the ankles. "Morning, sunshine, you're up early." I heard the coffee maker. She shuffled to their small kitchen table, pulling her ratty, stuffed giraffe closer. "It sounds like Grandpa snoring." Mike chuckled, setting her plate down. "Well, now I'll never unhear that." He ran a gentle hand over her hair. "Got your math test today, right?" Sarah nodded, carefully arranging her orange segments into a smile. "Mrs. Peterson says I might get the highest score in class." "That's my girl." Pride swelled in his chest. Sarah had inherited her mother's brains, thank goodness. "Eat up now. We've got 20 minutes before Operation School Day begins." While Sarah ate, Mike packed her lunch. Peanut butter and honey on wheat, apple slices, carefully treated with lemon juice to prevent browning, and the last granola bar from the box. The morning sun was beginning to paint the kitchen walls. Gold, highlighting the water stain in the corner that the landlord kept promising to fix. "Daddy?" Sarah's voice had that tone, the one that usually preceded a difficult question. "Melissa's having a birthday party at Adventure Zone next weekend. Can I go?" Mike's hands stilled on the lunch bag. Adventure Zone meant a present, a new outfit, because Sarah had outgrown her party clothes, and the entrance fee. He forced a smile. "We'll see, sunshine. Let's focus on acing that math test first, okay?" Sarah's face fell slightly, but she nodded. She was getting too good at reading between the lines of "we'll see." The rest of their morning routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Sarah brushed her teeth while Mike laid out her clothes. He braided her hair, not as neatly as Catherine would have, but he'd learned to make it presentable. Sarah packed her backpack, double-checking her homework folder with a thoroughness that made him smile. At the front door, Mike knelt to straighten Sarah's collar. "Remember, head up, heart open, do my best," Sarah finished their morning mantra. It was something Catherine used to say, now a daily ritual between father and daughter. "That's right." He pulled her into a quick hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I love you, sunshine." "Love you too, Daddy." She squeezed him tight, then pulled back with a serious expression. "Don't be late for work today." "Okay." Mr. Pete was grumpy about it last time. Mike's stomach tightened, but he kept his smile steady. "Don't you worry about that. Just focus on showing that math test who's boss." He watched Sarah walk down the street to the bus stop, her backpack bobbing with each step. Other kids were gathering there too, their parents waving from warm cars before heading to office jobs. Mike checked his watch. 30 minutes to get to Pete's auto shop. Just enough time if the ancient Chevy pickup started on the first try. As he turned back into the house to get ready for work, his eyes caught the old alarm clock through his bedroom door. The morning light made its scratched face gleam like a lucky penny. Another day beginning, another chance to make it all work somehow. For Sarah, he'd find a way. He always did. Pete's auto shop materialized through the morning fog like an old battleship, all rust-streaked metal and faded signage. Mike's father's toolbox rattled in the bed of his pickup as he pulled into his usual spot. Third from the left, where the security light still worked. 20 years of oil changes, transmission rebuilds, and countless repairs had been performed with these tools. The box was lighter now. He'd had to sell some pieces to cover Sarah's dental work last winter, cutting it close again. "Thompson," Pete's gravelly voice carried across the lot. The old mechanic stood in the garage doorway, silhouetted by fluorescent lights, wiping his hands on a red shop rag that had long ago forgotten its original color. "Traffic was rough on 5th, Mike lied, hefting his toolbox. They both knew the morning rush wouldn't start for another hour, but Pete just grunted and shuffled back inside. That was Pete's way, gruff concern wrapped in weathered professionalism. The familiar symphony of the shop welcomed Mike. Air compressors sighing, diagnostic computers beeping, rubber mallets conducting percussion against stubborn parts. He made his way to Bay 3, his bay, where Mrs. Henderson's Buick waited like a patient on an operating table. "Morning, Mike," Jimmy, the shop's youngest mechanic, called out from under a lifted Honda. At 23, he reminded Mike of himself when he'd first started, back when Catherine was still alive, and the future seemed as wide open as a Texas highway. Mike set up his tools with practiced precision. "Morning, Jimmy. How's that timing belt coming along?" "Like wrestling an octopus, but I'm winning." Jimmy's laugh echoed off the concrete floor. "Hey, your girl's got that math test today, right? Sarah's gonna ace it, no doubt." A smile warmed Mike's face. The whole shop knew about Sarah's academic achievements. They were his pride, his light, shared during lunch breaks and slow afternoons. "That she will. Kid's smarter than her old man, thank goodness." The morning progressed like a well-oiled machine. Mrs. Henderson's alternator was replaced by 10, followed by 2 oil changes and a brake job. Mike's hands moved with the certainty of experience, muscle memory built from thousands of similar repairs. Each completed job meant another few dollars toward rent, toward Sarah's school supplies, toward keeping their small world turning. "Thompson!" Pete's voice boomed across the shop floor just as Mike was finishing up a coolant flush. "Got Mrs. Martinez coming in. Says she won't let anyone else touch her car." Mike nodded, checking his watch. It was almost lunchtime, and he'd promised to call Sarah's school during his break to confirm the details for her upcoming field trip. Another payment he'd have to juggle somehow. Mrs. Martinez's ancient Corolla was his steady Friday customer, but she'd shown up on a Tuesday this time. The elderly woman waited by the front desk, wringing her hands. "Mike, thank goodness. The noise. It's back, and I have to drive to my sister's in Houston this weekend." "We'll figure it out, Mrs. Martinez," Mike assured her, leading her to the waiting area. She was on a fixed income, like many of his regulars. He'd worked out payment plans with her before, keeping them off Pete's books. Some things were more important than immediate payment. As he popped the Corolla's hood, Pete appeared at his elbow. "Mike, got a minute?" The concern in his boss's voice made Mike's stomach tighten. Pete led him to the small office, closing the door behind them. The room smelled of coffee and old invoices. "Corporate's breathing down my neck," Pete began, settling into his creaking desk chair. "They're talking about quarterly performance reviews, standardized pricing. No more of this sliding scale stuff we do for the regulars." Mike's hands clenched. "Pete, some of these folks barely make ends meet. They trust us." I know. Pete ran a hand through his thinning hair. 25 years I've run this shop my way. Now some suit in Chicago wants to tell me how to treat my customers." He fixed Mike with a serious look. "Things are changing, Mike. We're going to have to change with them." The implication hung heavy in the air. No more payment plans. No more helping elderly customers with creative bookkeeping. No more being the neighborhood guardian angel with a wrench. "I understand," Mike said, though his throat felt tight. "And Mike," Pete added as he turned to leave, "these late arrivals. Corporate's watching that too. I can't keep covering for you, son. Not anymore." Mike nodded, stepping back into the shop floor. Mrs. Martinez waved from the waiting area, her kind face creased with worry about her car. In Bay 2, Jimmy was helping a young mother manage her squirming toddler while explaining a repair estimate. This shop was more than just a workplace. It was a community lifeline. He opened his father's toolbox, running his fingers over the worn handles. Each tool held memories, his father's lessons, his first solo repair, teaching Sarah to change a tire in the driveway. The morning light filtered through the high windows, catching on the chrome surfaces, making them shine like promises. The rain started just before noon, painting the world in shades of grey. Mike was finishing up Mrs. Martinez's car when the first drops began drumming against the shop's metal roof. Thunder rolled in the distance, nature's own engine trouble. "Brewing overhead. Looks like a big one coming," Jimmy commented, peering through the garage door. "Good thing we fixed Mrs. Henderson's wipers this morning." Mike was about to respond when he saw her through the curtain of rain, a woman in a wheelchair struggling near the curb across the street. Her wheels had caught in a pothole, and the rain was coming down harder now, plastering her expensive-looking blouse to her shoulders. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:15. His lunch break had officially ended 5 minutes ago, and Pete's warning about corporate oversight echoed in his mind. But the woman was clearly struggling, and the rain was getting worse. "Jimmy, can you finish up Mrs. Martinez's oil change?" Without waiting for an answer, Mike grabbed his jacket and jogged out into the downpour. The rain immediately soaked through his work shirt as he crossed the street. Up close, he could see the woman's mounting frustration as she tried to free her wheelchair from the treacherous spot. "Ma'am?" He approached carefully, not wanting to startle her. "Let me help you with that." She looked up, raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. Despite her sophisticated appearance, there was something vulnerable in her eyes that reminded him of Sarah when she faced a particularly challenging problem. "Oh, thank you," she said, her voice carrying a hint of embarrassment. "The wheel caught. And then with this rain, no problem at all." Mike positioned himself behind the chair. "If you could just lean forward a bit. There we go." With careful maneuvering and strength born from years of lifting engine blocks, he freed the wheelchair from its predicament. "Is there somewhere I can help you get to?" he asked, noting how the rain was now coming down in sheets. The woman's designer suit was thoroughly soaked, but she managed a grateful smile. "My driver was supposed to meet me here, but with this weather..." She gestured helplessly at her phone, its screen dark and unresponsive. "Could I perhaps use a phone inside somewhere?" Mike looked back at Pete's auto shop, then at his watch. 12:30. He was already 15 minutes late returning from lunch, but leaving her here wasn't an option. Catherine would never have forgiven him. "The shop's right across the street. You can make your call from there, get dry at least." He positioned himself behind the wheelchair again. "Ready?" The next few minutes were a blur of rain and careful navigation. By the time they reached the shop, Mike was drenched to the bone, his work boots squelching with each step. Pete was waiting just inside the door, his face set in stone. "Thompson, my office. Now." Mike helped the woman get settled in the waiting area, made sure Jimmy got her a phone and a cup of coffee, then followed Pete into the small office. He already knew what was coming. "Third time this month you've been late back from lunch," Pete began, his voice heavy with resignation. "Corporate's been reviewing time cards. They're looking for any reason to clean house, bring in their own. People, Pete, there was a woman stuck in the rain." "I saw." Pete's weathered hands gripped the edge of his desk. "You did the right thing, Mike. You always do. But corporate doesn't care about right things. They care about numbers, efficiency, profit margins." The ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, stirring the humid air. Through the office window, Mike could see the woman in the waiting area, talking on the shop phone, her wheelchair gleaming with rain. "They're forcing my hand here, son." Pete wouldn't meet his eyes. "With your tardiness record, I have to let you go." The words hit Mike like a hammer to the chest. "Pete, please. Sarah's field trip payment is due next week. I've got rent coming up." "I know." Pete pulled an envelope from his desk drawer. "I put in a little extra. It's not much, but it might help until you find something else." He stood, extending his hand. "You're a good mechanic, Mike, and a better man. I'll be happy to give you a reference." Mike's legs felt wooden as he walked back to his bay. Jimmy was helping the woman into a sleek black car that had just pulled up, holding an umbrella over her head. She caught Mike's eye and smiled, mouthing, "Thank you," as the car door closed. He gathered his father's toolbox, now lighter than ever. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was Sarah's face, how he'd have to tell her they couldn't afford Adventure Zone, how her math test victory celebration would have to be put on hold. As he loaded the toolbox into his truck, the woman's car pulled away, disappearing into the gray afternoon like a ghost. Mike sat in his pickup, listening to the rain tap against the roof, and wondered how he was going to make it through another storm. The school bus's yellow reflection rippled in rain puddles as it pulled up to the corner. Mike forced his hands to unclench from the steering wheel of his parked truck, watching Sarah bounce down the steps, her backpack clutched over her head. Against the lingering drizzle, her face lit up when she spotted his pickup. He didn't usually get home before her. "Daddy!" She sprinted through the rain, pigtails flying. "Guess what? I got 100 on my math test. Mrs. Peterson said it was the only perfect score in the whole class." Mike scooped her up in a hug, breathing in the familiar mix of pencil shavings and strawberry shampoo. "That's my genius, girl. I knew you could do it." Her report card fell from her backpack as they hurried inside, floating to the floor like a leaf. Mike picked it up, his throat tightening at the row of A's staring back at him. Sarah deserved so much more than he could give her now. "Can we have celebration pizza?" Sarah asked, shrugging off her wet jacket. "Just a small one? I saved $2 from my lunch money this week." Mike's heart cracked a little. Even at 10, she was always thinking about money, trying to help in her own way. "You know what? Pizza. Sounds perfect. A perfect dinner for a perfect test score." He'd use the extra money Pete had given him. Tomorrow he'd start looking for work, but tonight was for celebrating his daughter's achievement, some moments you couldn't put a price on. While Sarah changed out of her school clothes, Mike called Tony's Pizza their favorite local place. Tony had known them since Sarah was in diapers, had catered Catherine's funeral at cost. "The usual, Mike? Haven't seen you folks in a while." "The usual, Tony. Sarah aced her math test today." "That girl's going places," Tony chuckled. "I'll throw in some garlic knots on the house for the math whiz." Back in the living room, Sarah had spread her homework across the coffee table, her face scrunched in concentration as she tackled her reading assignment. Mike watched her from the kitchen doorway, marveling at how much she looked like Catherine when she studied. "Hey, sunshine?" He settled beside her on the worn couch. "Tell me about this test. What kind of problems did Mrs. Peterson give you?" Sarah launched into an enthusiastic explanation of fractions and decimals, her hands moving animatedly. Mike nodded along, trying to focus on her words instead of the growing knot in his stomach. How many more mortgage payments could he make? Would they have to move, change schools? Daddy, Sarah's voice pulled him back. Are you okay? You look tired. Just proud of you, that's all. He managed a smile. Hey, want to see something cool? He pulled out his father's old leather wallet, worn smooth by decades of use. From behind his driver's license, he extracted a faded photograph. Is that Mom? Sarah leaned closer, studying the image of a younger Catherine, laughing as she held up a perfect test score of her own. 7th grade Geography B champion, Mike explained. Your grandmother took this picture right after they announced the winners. Your mom was just like you, smartest kid in class. Sarah traced her mother's smile with a gentle finger. Do you think she'd be proud of me? Oh, sunshine. Mike pulled her close. She'd be over the moon, just like I am. The pizza arrived, filling their small house with the aroma of cheese and garlic. They ate on the couch, breaking their usual table rule, while Sarah told him about her friend Melissa's upcoming birthday party plans. And they're going to have a rock-climbing wall. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. I've never tried rock climbing before. Mike focused on his pizza, the taste turning to ash in his mouth. That sounds really fun, sweetheart. Later, after Sarah was tucked into bed with a final congratulations on her test score, Mike sat at the kitchen table with their bills spread before him like a failed hand of cards. Pete's envelope contained 3 weeks' pay. Generous, but not enough. Not nearly. Enough? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through local job listings. A few mechanic positions, but nothing close by. He couldn't afford to commute far, not with gas prices what they were. His eyes burned with exhaustion and worry. From down the hall came the soft sound of Sarah talking in her sleep, a habit she'd inherited from Catherine. The sound stirred something in Mike's chest, a fierce determination that pushed back against the creeping despair. He'd figure something out. He had to. Sarah's future depended on it. The stack of job applications on Mike's passenger seat grew thicker as the morning wore on. He'd dropped Sarah at school with his usual smile, waiting until she disappeared through the front doors before letting his shoulders slump. 6 repair. Shops visited before lunch, and all he had to show for it were sympathetic looks and empty promises to keep his application on file. Times are tough all over, Jerry at Precision Auto had said, awkwardly shuffling papers on his desk. Corporate shops are squeezing out the independents. We had to let 2 guys go last month. Mike sat in his truck outside Lou's garage, the last independent shop in a 20-mile radius. The help wanted sign that had given him hope turned out to be 6 months old, forgotten in the window like yesterday's news. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Martinez. Heard what happened at Pete's. On car making noise again. Can you look at it? We'll pay cash. His fingers hovered over the keypad. Working under the table could help short term, but if word got back to Pete, it could jeopardize his reference. The local news station played quietly on his truck's radio as he considered his options. And in business news, Elizabeth Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations, continues her nationwide tour of potential expansion sites, the tech billionaire's latest acquisition. Mike turned it off, not in the mood for stories about successful people. He pulled out the classified section he'd picked up at the gas station, circling another possibility with his increasingly stubby pencil. The bell tower of St. Mary's Church tolled noon as he walked into Joe's Mechanics, hope fading with each step on the oil-stained concrete. The owner, a burly man with grease-stained coveralls, barely glanced at his application. Look familiar? Joe gestured to a pile of papers on his desk. Got 20 apps this week alone. 3 from Pete's shop. What's going on over there? Corporate. Changes, Mike said simply, recognizing Jimmy's handwriting on one of the applications. His stomach twisted. He wasn't the only one jumping ship. Back in his truck, Mike pulled out his father's old address book, the pages yellow with age. He'd been avoiding this, but pride wouldn't pay the bills. One by one, he called old contacts from his father's days in the business. Thompson's boy. Man, haven't heard that name in years. Wish I could help, Mike. We're barely staying afloat. Ourselves. Have you tried the dealerships? They're always looking. The dealerships. He'd been avoiding them too. Soul-crushing work, pushing unnecessary repairs on people who couldn't afford them. Everything his father had taught him not to be. His last stop was Frank's Auto Body, where his father had gotten his start 40 years ago. The building looked smaller than he remembered, its red paint fading to pink in the afternoon sun. Mike. Thompson! Frank emerged from behind a lifted Subaru, wiping his hands on a rag. His white hair was thinner than Mike remembered, but his handshake was still firm. Your old man was the best damn mechanic I ever trained. He spoke highly of you. Frank. Mike glanced around the shop, noting the empty bays. I was hoping. Frank's face fell. Kid, I heard about Pete's. Way the industry's going, we'll all be corporate soon. He hesitated. I can't hire right now, but I know a guy at Chen Motors. They're opening a new facility just outside town. Might be worth a shot. Chen Motors, Mike frowned. The name tickled something in his memory. Yeah, part of that big tech company, Chen Innovations. They're diversifying into electric vehicles. Frank shrugged. Not exactly your father's kind of work, but it's something. Mike thanked him and headed back to his truck, the afternoon sun, beating down on his shoulders. A sleek black car passed him on the street, similar to the one that had picked up the woman in the wheelchair. For a moment he wondered how she was doing, if she'd made it to her destination okay. His phone buzzed. Again, Sarah's school. His heart stopped until he read the message. Just a reminder about the field trip payment due Friday. He opened his wallet, counting the remainder of Pete's severance. Not enough for rent and the field trip. Not nearly enough. Sato. Chen Motors' business card Frank had pressed into his hand seemed to burn in his pocket. Corporate work, everything he'd tried to avoid. But Sarah's face floated in his mind. Her excitement about the birthday party, her pride in the math test, her quiet acceptance when he had to say no to things other kids took for granted. Sometimes being a father meant swallowing your pride. His dad had taught him that too. The local newspaper, thin as tissue paper these days, fluttered on Mike's doorstep early Thursday morning. He almost stepped over it. Who had time for news when you were job hunting? But the bold headline caught his eye. Tech billionaire Elizabeth. Chen tours local sites. Major investment coming to River Valley. Below was a photo that made Mike's coffee mug slip from his fingers, splattering dark drops across the concrete porch. There, in a wheelchair at some Chamber of Commerce meeting, sat the woman he'd helped in the rain. Elizabeth Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations, the woman whose rescue had cost him his job. Daddy? Sarah's voice drifted from inside. Was that a crash? Just fumbled my coffee. Sunshine. He quickly folded the paper under his arm, his mind spinning. Better hurry up with that breakfast. Bus comes in 20. But Sarah was already at the door, frowning at the spilled coffee. Her eyes caught the newspaper headline, then widened at the photo. Hey, isn't that the lady from the shop? Melissa's mum works at the bank, and she said there was this really important person in town who... She stopped, her quick mind connecting dots Mike had hoped to keep separate. Why aren't you dressed for work? The question hung in the morning air like frost. Mike looked at his daughter, seeing Catherine's sharp intelligence in her searching gaze. She was too smart to fool for long. Let's sit down for a minute, sunshine. They settled on the porch steps, the newspaper between them like a barrier. Sarah's hand crept into his, small fingers squeezing with a strength that nearly broke him. You lost your job helping her, didn't you? Sarah's voice was quiet, adult-like in its understanding. That's why you've been home in the mornings. Why? You looked so sad at pizza night. Mike swallowed hard. I'm sorry I didn't tell you right away. I was trying to protect me. Sarah's free hand traced the newspaper photo. Like always, a garbage truck rumbled past, the normalcy of Thursday morning continuing around their small bubble of revelation. From next door came the smell of fresh laundry, Mrs. Garcia's sheets flapping in the breeze like surrender flags. "We'll be okay," Mike said, trying to inject certainty into his voice. "I've got some good leads. That Chen Motors place is hiring, but that's her company." Sarah straightened, suddenly animated. "The lady you helped, she owns it. If you just told her what happened—" "Sarah." Mike gentled his tone. "Life's not like those movies. You love billionaire CEOs don't just, but you helped her." Sarah's voice rose with conviction. "When she was stuck in the rain, you helped her without even knowing who she was. That's got to mean something." The school bus's familiar growl approached the corner. Sarah stood, shouldering her backpack, but her face held a determination that made Mike nervous. "Promise me you won't do anything, sunshine. No letters to CEOs or I promise." She kissed his cheek, then hesitated. "Does this mean I can't go to Melissa's party?" The question hit like a physical blow. "I'm trying to figure something out. Maybe if it's okay." She managed a smile that looked too much like his own brave face. "It's probably going to be too noisy anyway, and rock climbing is kind of scary." Mike watched her join the other kids. At the bus stop, her shoulders straight, despite the weight she now carried. Mrs. Garcia waved from her yard, her eyes full of knowing sympathy. News traveled fast in their neighborhood. Inside, Mike unfolded the newspaper again. Elizabeth Chen's accomplishments filled half a page. Tech innovations, charitable foundations, revolutionary approaches to corporate culture. The article mentioned her personal touch, how she insisted on touring potential sites herself, despite mobility challenges from a recent accident. His phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Saw the paper. Hell of a coincidence, son." "Maybe." Mike turned the phone face down. He couldn't afford maybes. The rent was due in 10 days. Sarah's field trip money was due tomorrow, and Melissa's birthday party loomed like a neon reminder of all he couldn't provide. But when he moved to toss the newspaper in the recycling bin, he found himself carefully folding it instead, tucking it into his father's old toolbox. Sometimes life had a way of coming full circle. His dad had taught him that, along with the importance of keeping your tools clean and your conscience clearer. The morning sun crept across the kitchen floor, illuminating the empty coffee mug on the counter. Sarah's, with its faded "World's" best dad lettering. He had some resumes to drop off at Chen Motors today. For her, he'd swallow his pride. For her, he'd do anything. The sound of helicopter blades shattered the Friday morning quiet, rattling the windows of Mike's small house. He was at the kitchen table, sorting through bills, when the steady thrum grew louder, closer, until it seemed to hover directly overhead. Sarah burst through the front door, her backpack still on. "Daddy, there's helicopters, 2 of them." Mike followed her onto their patched front lawn, shielding his eyes against the sun. 2 sleek black helicopters circled the neighborhood before touching down in the empty lot at the end of their street, the Eiter, one where kids played baseball in summer. The Chen Innovations logo gleamed on their sides. Neighbors emerged from their homes like cautious prairie dogs. Mrs. Garcia clutched her rosary. Mr. Wilson from across the street still held his morning paper. All eyes fixed on the helicopters as their blades slowed. "Maybe she remembered," Sarah whispered, gripping Mike's hand. "Maybe she found out." Mike's response died in his throat as the helicopter door opened. A ramp extended, and there she was. Elizabeth Chen, CEO of a tech empire, being wheeled down by a professional-looking assistant. She wore a crisp blue suit that probably cost more than Mike's truck, but her smile was exactly as he remembered it from that rainy Tuesday. She spotted him immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you'll forgive the dramatic entrance, but when I discovered what happened at Pete's auto shop," she gestured to her assistant, who produced a familiar business card, the one Pete had been carrying when he fired Mike. "Your former employer was quite helpful in locating you." Mike felt Sarah's hand tighten in his. The entire neighborhood watched as Elizabeth Chen's wheelchair glided smoothly across their uneven sidewalk, stopping right in front of their worn welcome mat. "Ma'am, Mike started, but she held up a hand. "Elizabeth, please, and before you say anything else, I need to tell you a story." She smiled at Sarah, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Would you mind if we went inside? I believe I owe your father a proper thank you and perhaps an apology." Their small living room had never felt smaller than when Elizabeth Chen rolled into it. Her assistant remained tactfully by the door, while Mrs. Garcia, not so tactfully, peered through her window next door. "That morning in the rain," Elizabeth began, "I was actually on my way to tour potential sites for our new electric vehicle facility. My driver got lost, the wheelchair lift in our car malfunctioned, and then the rain—" She shook her head. "I'm not used to feeling helpless. Haven't been since the accident 2 years ago. But there I was, stuck and soaked, when you appeared." Mike shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Anyone would have—" "No!" Elizabeth cut in firmly. "Not anyone. I watched you through the shop window, saw your boss call you in. I noticed your hesitation, but you helped me anyway. Do you know what I look for in my companies, Mr. Thompson? Not just skill, though Pete says you're the best mechanic he's ever worked with, but character." She reached into a sleek leather portfolio. "Which brings me to why I'm here. Pete told me everything about corporate's pressure, about your tardiness incidents. All 3 of them related to helping others, I understand. The elderly customer with no ride home, the young mother with a flat tire and a car full of groceries, and me." Mike felt Sarah lean against him, her presence both comfort and courage. "I couldn't just leave them stranded." "Exactly." Elizabeth's smile widened. "Which is precisely why I want you to run our new community outreach program at Chen Motors." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "I'm sorry, what?" "We're not just building another corporate facility here," Elizabeth continued. "We're creating a community hub, electric vehicle education, apprenticeship programs, emergency repair services for low-income families. But it needs someone who understands both the technical side and the human side. Someone who puts people before profits, even at personal cost." She pulled out a folder embossed with the Chen Innovations logo. "The position comes with full benefits, obviously. A significant salary increase from your previous job, and," she glanced at Sarah with a knowing look, "a flexible schedule for family obligations." Mike stared at the folder, his father's voice echoing in his memory. "Sometimes life hands you a wrench you never expected to need." "There's one more thing," Elizabeth added, her eyes twinkling. "The position comes with a company car. Electric, of course, though I hear you're quite good at keeping old trucks running." Sarah's grip on his arm was almost painful now. Through the window, he could see the neighbors gathered, their faces hopeful. His community, the one he'd always tried to help. One repair at a time. "When would you need me to start?" His voice was steadier than he felt. Elizabeth Chen's answering smile held the warmth of a summer morning. "How about we discuss the details over lunch? I hear Tony's Pizza is excellent." Tony's Pizza had never seen anything quite like it. A tech billionaire's wheelchair beside a worn vinyl booth, her security team trying to blend in among the faded sports memorabilia and checkered tablecloths. Tony himself had emerged from the kitchen, flour-dusted and flustered, to serve them personally. "The usual for the Thompsons," he announced proudly, "and for Ms. Chen, our house special." Sarah sat between Mike and Elizabeth, her math test proudly displayed on the table after Elizabeth had asked about school. The job offer letter lay beside it, its corporate letterhead stark against the red and white tablecloth. 100%, Elizabeth noted, studying the test. "Advanced mathematics. 2. You know we have a STEM education program for employees' children. Full scholarship through college if they maintain their grades." Mike's pizza stuck in his throat. That's not in the offer letter." "No," Elizabeth smiled, reaching into her portfolio again, "because that's not part of the job offer. That's part of something else." She pulled out another document, this one thicker. "Tell me, Mr. Thompson, what do you know about the Chen Foundation?" "Only what I've read," Mike admitted. "Your charitable organization, right? Among other things. We have a particular focus on identifying exceptional individuals, people who demonstrate extraordinary character despite challenging circumstances. People who help others even when it costs them everything. She slid the document across the table. We don't just want to give you a job, Mr. Thompson. We want to invest in your family's future. Mike's hands trembled as he read the document's title, Chen Foundation Family Grant Program. The numbers below made his vision blur. Full education funding for Sarah through any degree she chooses, Elizabeth explained. A housing allowance to get you out of that rental and into a home of your own. Healthcare coverage that would have taken care of your late wife's treatments, had you had it then. She paused, letting that sink in. And a community investment fund for you to administer, helping others who are struggling like you were. Sarah's hand found his under the table, squeezing tight. Mike stared at the papers, his father's voice in his head. If something seems too good to be true, why? The question came out rougher than he intended. Why all this? Just because I helped you in the rain? Elizabeth's eyes softened. When I had my accident 2 years ago, I learned something about humanity. Some people looked away, some offered help for show, for profit, for recognition, but a few, a precious few, helped simply because it was right. Those are the people who change the world, Mr. Thompson. One small act of kindness at a time. She gestured to the restaurant around them. Your neighbors tell quite a story about you. The single father who fixes cars after hours for those who can't afford regular rates. The man who keeps this community's vehicles running so they can get to work, to school, to doctor's appointments. Pete told me you've never turned away someone in genuine need. Tony appeared with garlic knots, his timing impeccable as always. On the house, he insisted, for the man who kept my delivery van running through 3 brutal winters. See? Elizabeth's smile was knowing. You've been investing in this community for years. We're just giving you the resources to do it properly. Mike looked at Sarah, seeing in her eyes the same hope he'd carried when Catherine was first diagnosed. The hope of a future unlimited by financial constraints. The hope he'd had to watch die in a hospital room filled with bills they couldn't pay. There's one condition, Elizabeth added, her tone turning serious. You have to accept both offers, the job and the grant. We're not just looking for an employee. We're investing in a community leader, someone who understands both the mechanical and human aspects of what we're building here. Sarah's grip tightened again. Mike could practically hear her thinking, calculating, hoping. She had Catherine's mind for numbers, for possibilities. Can I? Mike's voice caught. He cleared his throat. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. Elizabeth nodded to her assistant, who produced a business card with a direct number. Take the weekend. Talk it over with Sarah, but remember, she glanced at the math test, still lying on the table. Sometimes the most important calculations are the simplest. What adds up to a better future for your family? As if on cue, Melissa and her mother walked into Tony's. Sarah shrunk slightly in her seat, probably remembering the birthday party she thought she couldn't attend. Elizabeth noticed. Melissa's party is tomorrow at Adventure Zone, isn't it? She smiled at Sarah's surprised nod. I hear they have an excellent rock climbing wall. Mike watched his daughter's face light up with possibility, saw in her eyes the future he'd always wanted to give her but never could. Sometimes life's biggest turns came down to the smallest moments. A rainy morning, a stuck wheelchair, a simple choice to help. His father's toolbox was in his truck outside. The tools inside had built more than just cars. They'd built relationships, trust, community. Maybe it was time they helped build something bigger. Saturday morning found Mike in the garage, surrounded by moving boxes he'd scrounged from behind the local grocery store. He wasn't packing, not yet, but their presence helped make the possibility feel real. Each cardboard container seemed to ask its own question. Could he really leave the security of everything familiar? Was he ready for such a dramatic change? The Chen Foundation's grant paperwork lay on his workbench, beside the worn photo album he'd been looking through all morning. Catherine smiled up at him from their wedding day, her eyes bright with dreams of the future. She'd always believed he could do more, Be more. I thought I'd find you out here, Mrs. Garcia's voice carried from the garage doorway. She held a plate of still warm empanadas. You always retreat to your tools when you're thinking hard thoughts. Mike accepted the plate with a grateful smile. Their elderly neighbor had been looking out for them since Catherine's passing. Got a lot to think about. She settled onto the old shop stool he kept for customers. My Carlos was like you, always worried about making the right choice. But he taught me something important. Sometimes the right choice feels scary because it's asking us to become more than we think we are. Through the open garage door, Mike could see Sarah and Melissa in the front yard, plotting out their rock. Climbing strategy for the party later. Elizabeth's assistant had delivered the birthday gift and party outfit this morning. A kindness Mike hadn't asked for, but desperately appreciated. It's not just about the job, he admitted, turning a wrench over in his hands. The foundation wants me to manage a community program, help people like us. But what if I'm not qualified? What if I mess it up? Mrs. Garcia's knowing laugh filled the garage. Mikey, you've been running a community program from this very garage for years. Every car you fixed for half price, every payment plan you arranged. That was you managing hope for people who needed it. She had a point. His father's account book, still sitting on the workbench, held years of flexible payment plans and discounted repairs. Not the most profitable business model, but it had kept dozens of families mobile, employed, able to make their own way. Sarah's excited, he said softly, watching his daughter demonstrate a climbing move to her friend. Scared too, I think, about changing schools, but mostly excited. That girl is smart like her mama and strong like her papa. Mrs. Garcia stood, and patting his shoulder. She'll bloom wherever you plant her, but better soil makes for stronger roots. The morning wore on. Mike cleaned his tools one by one, a meditation passed down from his father. Each wrench and socket held memories, teaching Sarah to change a tire, fixing Mrs. Martinez's endless carburetor issues the night he'd worked until dawn to fix Tony's delivery van before the morning rush. Pete stopped by around noon, looking oddly uncomfortable without his shop coveralls. Heard the kids got a party today. Yeah, heading there soon. Mike gestured to the grant paperwork. Any thoughts? Already told Chen everything she needed to know about you. Pete settled his bulk against the workbench. But I'll tell you something too. Remember that training program we talked about starting? The one corporate shot down? Chen Motors is offering you the chance to build something like that, but bigger, better. Mike nodded slowly. They dreamed of teaching young mechanics, creating opportunities for kids who couldn't afford trade school. You really think I could run something like that? Son, you've been running an unofficial charity garage for years. Might as well get paid properly for it. Pete's gruff laugh held a hint of pride. Besides, someone needs to show those tech folks how to fix things properly. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage door as Mike packed his tools away. Sarah would be ready for the party soon, excited to try rock climbing for the first time. The moving boxes stood silent sentinel, waiting for his decision. His phone buzzed, a text from Elizabeth Chen. No pressure, but if you're interested, I'd love to show you and Sarah the facility plans tomorrow. There's a perfect spot for that training program Pete mentioned. Mike's throat tightened. Of course she knew about that dream too. She'd done her homework, understood exactly what this opportunity meant, not just to him, but to the whole community. The last tool he packed was his father's oldest wrench. The metal was worn smooth from decades of use, generations of fixing what was broken. Maybe that's what this was about, fixing things on a larger scale, helping more people get back on the road toward their dreams. Sarah appeared in the doorway, ready for the party in her new clothes. Time to go, Daddy. I'm nervous about the climbing wall, but excited too. Kind of like you and the new job, right? Mike looked at his daughter, seeing Catherine's wisdom in her smile. Sometimes the hardest paths led to the best destinations. The keys to their new house caught the morning sunlight, gleaming like promises in Mike's palm. After signing the paperwork at Chen Motors yesterday, Elizabeth's team had moved with surprising speed. The modest but well-maintained three-bedroom ranch house sat on a quiet street just 10 minutes from the facility, its fresh paint and neat lawn a stark contrast to their old rental. "Can I pick my room?" Sarah bounced on her toes beside him, still flying high from conquering the rock wall at yesterday's party. "Melissa says her cousin lives just 3 blocks away. Go for it, sunshine." Mike watched her dart through the front door, her footsteps echoing through empty rooms full of possibility. The house keys felt both foreign and right in his hand, like a tool he was just learning to use. His first day at Chen Motors had been a whirlwind of introductions and orientations. The facility was a perfect blend of cutting-edge technology and practical engineering, with a separate wing dedicated to the community programs he'd be overseeing. Elizabeth had thought of everything, from a student workspace for Sarah to do homework after school, to a fully equipped training garage for the apprenticeship program. "Mr. Thompson," a voice called from the driveway. A young man in Chen Motors coveralls stood beside a sleek electric vehicle. "Your company car, sir." "Ms. Chen asked me to walk you through the features." Mike approached the vehicle, its metallic blue paint reflecting the morning sky. This was the part that still felt surreal. The perks, the title, the respect in people's voices when they said his name. The young man, Todd, eagerly showed him the advanced diagnostic system, the self-parking features, the integrated community service alert system. "And this button here," Todd pointed, "connects you directly to emergency services if you encounter anyone broken down on the road. Ms. Chen said you'd want that feature easily accessible." Of course she had. She understood that helping others wasn't just his job, it was his instinct. "Daddy," Sarah's voice echoed from inside the house. "The bedroom at the back has a window seat, and there's a perfect spot for Mom's reading chair." The reading chair, Catherine's favorite, currently crammed in their old living room. One of the few pieces of furniture they'd kept after selling most things to pay for her treatments. Mike's throat tightened at the thought of seeing it in this new space, a bridge between their past and future. "Sir?" Todd hesitated. "Ms. Chen also asked me to give you this." He handed over an envelope containing a store credit card. "For furniture and household items. She said to remind you that it's not charity. It's an investment in the program's director being properly settled." Mike nodded, pocketing the card. He was learning to accept help, to understand that sometimes allowing others to give was as important as giving yourself. Inside, Sarah had already mapped out where everything should go. Her books along the window seat, her desk beneath the large window, her science fair trophies on the built-in shelves. "And look," she pointed to the backyard through her new window. "There's a perfect spot for a garden. Remember how Mom always wanted one?" "I remember." Mike smiled, seeing Catherine's dreams taking root in their daughter's imagination. "Maybe we can plant some tomatoes, fresh herbs." A knock at the door interrupted their planning. Their new neighbors, the Patels, stood on the porch with a homemade curry and warm smiles. "Welcome to Cedar Street. We heard you're the new director at Chen Motors. Our son is hoping to apply for the apprenticeship program." More neighbors stopped by throughout the morning, each bringing food, welcome, and stories of cars that might need his expertise. Mike realized that while the location had changed, his role remained the same, being a fixed point in people's lives, someone they could count on when things broke down. By afternoon, Sarah had arranged and rearranged her room 3 times. Her energy barely diminished. Mike sat on the front porch, watching Todd demonstrate the car's features to fascinated neighborhood kids. The moving truck wouldn't arrive until tomorrow, but already this place felt more like home than their rental had in years. His phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Hope the house meets expectations. Remember, your official introduction as program director is Monday, but take the weekend to settle in. P.S. Sarah might want to check the garage. There may be a surprise waiting." Mike smiled, remembering Elizabeth's words from their meeting yesterday. A fresh start doesn't mean leaving everything behind. It means building on the foundation you've already created. Daddy. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright. With plans. Can we get paint samples tomorrow? I'm thinking blue for my room, like the sky, like possibilities. Like possibilities indeed, Mike thought, clutching the house keys that felt more natural in his hand with each passing hour. The corporate ID badge felt heavy against Mike's chest as he navigated the gleaming hallways of Chen Motors' executive floor. 2 weeks into his new role, and he still fought the urge to reach for a wrench every time he passed the R&D lab. Instead, he clutched his tablet, trying to remember the acronyms from yesterday's budget meeting. Morning, Director Thompson. His assistant, Jenny, fell into step beside him. The quarterly projections meeting starts in 10 minutes, and Mr. Harrison from Corporate Development wants to discuss synergizing community initiatives with market penetration goals. She made air quotes around the corporate speak. Mike suppressed a sigh. Back at Pete's, market penetration meant having enough customers to keep the lights on. Here, it involved PowerPoint presentations and pie charts that made his head spin. Also, Jenny continued, there's a situation in the training garage. One of the apprentice candidates may have, accidentally, disassembled a prototype charging station. Now that was language he understood. Push my meeting with Harrison. Some things you can't fix with a pie chart. The training garage was his sanctuary in this chrome and glass world. Here, the smell of motor oil and sound of tools against metal made sense. He found the apprentice candidate, Kevin, barely 18, staring desperately at scattered components. Just wanted to understand how it worked, Kevin mumbled, face red. Didn't think it would have so many parts. Mike rolled up his sleeves, corporate jacket carefully folded over a chair. Grab your tools, kid. Best way to understand something is to put it back together. For the next hour, Mike guided Kevin through the reassembly, explaining each component's purpose. The boy's hands were skilled but uncertain, reminding Mike of himself at that age. When the final piece clicked into place, Kevin's face lit up with the universal joy of fixing what was broken. You've got good instincts, Mike told him. Just need to learn when to take things apart and when to leave them be. Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Kevin hesitated. Some of the other candidates, they say I don't belong here, that this program's just for show, to make the company look good. Mike's chest tightened, remembering similar doubts in his own early days. You know what my father taught me? A good mechanic isn't born knowing everything. They're born wanting to learn everything. Back in his office, and wasn't that still strange to think about, Mike found 3 urgent emails and a reminder about the upcoming board presentation. He needed to justify the community program's budget, prove its worth in corporate terms. Director Thompson? Harrison appeared in his doorway, smooth in his tailored suit. About our meeting. Corporate feels the community initiative might be too localized. We're thinking bigger picture, national scaling, standardized processes. Mike thought of Kevin's hands learning the charging station, of Mrs. Martinez's relief when he'd helped establish a reduced-rate service program for seniors. With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, communities aren't standardized, neither are their needs. This isn't a small-town garage anymore, Harrison pressed. We need metrics, scalability, ROI, return on investment. Mike pulled up the file Elizabeth had helped him prepare. Let me show you something. He displayed graphs tracking reduced emergency service calls, increased customer loyalty rates, and positive community engagement since the program began. Every person we help becomes a brand ambassador. Every student we train becomes a skilled worker in an emerging industry. That's not just good community service. It's good business. Harrison studied the data, frowning. These numbers, they're impressive, but maintaining individual community relationships across multiple locations is exactly what we should be doing. Elizabeth's voice came from the doorway. She wheeled into the office, a knowing smile on her face. That's why we hired someone. who understands both the human and mechanical aspects of what we're building. After Harrison left, Elizabeth lingered. "You're doing well, Mike. Better than you think. Some days I feel like that charging station Kevin took apart. Too many pieces. Not sure how they all fit together. But you helped him put it back together," she reminded him. "The same way you're helping build something here. One piece at a time." His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Got an A+ on my science project. My teacher wants to enter it in the regional fair." Mike smiled, remembering the evenings spent helping her build a working model of an electric motor. Some things didn't change, even in this new world of corporate meetings and quarterly reports. At heart, he was still a father, a teacher, a fixer of broken things. The corporate ID badge caught the afternoon light, no longer feeling quite so heavy. Maybe that's what adaptation was. Not changing who you are, but learning new ways to be yourself. The failed project report sat on Mike's desk like a ticking bomb. 3 months of work, $1 million investment, and the pilot program for mobile emergency repair units had just crashed and burned, literally. The prototype vehicle's electrical system had shorted during a demonstration for the board, sending sparks flying in front of a dozen corporate executives. "It's not as bad as it looks," Jenny tried to reassure him, but her usual confidence wavered. Only 3 board members called for an immediate program review, and the other 9, Mike rubbed his temples. They haven't responded to Elizabeth's emails yet. Perfect. Mike stared at the photo on his desk, Sarah's science fair victory from last week. She'd been so proud, explaining electric vehicle charging dynamics to the judges. Now he wondered if he'd even have a job by the time her next project came around. His phone buzzed with another message from Harrison. "Emergency meeting, 3 p.m. Bring complete program financials." The subtext was clear. Justify your continued existence. The morning crawled by in a blur of damage control. The engineering team's preliminary report pointed to a design flaw, one Mike should have caught during testing. He'd been so focused on the community service aspects, the mechanical basics had slipped through the cracks. "Mr. Thompson," Kevin hovered in his doorway looking worried. "We heard about what happened. The other apprentices, we wanted you to know." He thrust forward a folder filled with handwritten testimonials from program participants. "This program changed our lives. We don't want it to end." Mike's throat tightened as he read their words. Stories of hope, of second chances, of futures they never thought possible. He tucked the folder into his briefcase, next to the damning project report. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. Inside the conference room, Harrison sat with the board members, their faces professionally neutral. Elizabeth's absence was conspicuous. "Director Thompson," Harrison began, "today's incident raises serious concerns about the program's viability. The mobile repair unit represented a significant investment, which failed because of my oversight," Mike cut in. "I take full responsibility. This isn't just about one failure." Harrison clicked through a presentation. "Your community-focused approach, while admirable, isn't scaling efficiently. The apprenticeship program costs more per student than industry standard. The senior citizen discount program affects our profit margins. And now, this." The next hour was a blur of statistics, all pointing to one conclusion. His approach was too expensive, too personalized, too risky. Everything that made the program special was being reframed as a liability. Furthermore, Harrison continued, "Sarah's academic performance has declined recently." Mike's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Her last math test. She scored only 92%. Given the Foundation's investment in her education, that's enough." Elizabeth's voice cut through the room as she wheeled through the door. "I apologize for my tardiness. Traffic was terrible, though not as terrible as using a child's test scores to pressure her father." She positioned herself between Mike and the board. "The mobile unit failed, yes, but do you know what Mike did immediately after? He started redesigning it, incorporating safety features that would have prevented the short. He was in the workshop until midnight, not to save his job, but because he couldn't bear the thought of letting down the community that needs this service. She produced her own folder. This morning I visited 3 of our other facilities. Their community programs are struggling. Low engagement, minimal impact, poor retention. Why? Because they followed the standardized corporate model. They didn't have someone who understands that every community, every person needs something slightly different. The numbers don't lie, Harrison insisted. No, but they tell different stories depending on who's reading them. Elizabeth smiled. Mike, show them what you showed me last night. With trembling fingers, Mike pulled up his revised designs on the conference room screen. The original unit tried to be too many things, but if we specialize them, one for basic repairs, one for emergency services, one for educational outreach, we actually reduce costs while increasing effectiveness, like having the right tool for each specific job. He walked them through the modifications, the cost savings, the improved safety features. With each slide, he felt more confident, more in his element. This wasn't so different from explaining repairs to customers at Pete's, just with fancier equipment. And the apprenticeship program costs? Harrison pressed. Mike opened Kevin's folder. Let me show you the real return on that investment. By the time he finished speaking, even Harrison's expression had softened slightly. The board called for a brief recess to discuss privately. In the hallway, Elizabeth squeezed his hand. Remember what I told you about why we chose you? She asked softly. It wasn't just because you helped me that day. It was because you understand that fixing things isn't just about mechanics. It's about making connections, building trust, seeing the human element in every equation. Mike nodded, thinking of Sarah's 92%. Still something to be proud of. Still part of her journey. Sometimes the biggest failures led to the most important fixes. That evening, Mike sat in their new living room, surrounded by family photos he'd finally gotten around to hanging. Sarah curled beside him on the couch, her math homework spread across her lap, while she explained why 92% wasn't actually a failure. See, Dad? I got this question wrong because I found a different way to solve it. Mrs. Anderson said my method was actually more advanced, but not the one they're teaching right now. She grinned. Kind of like how you fixed Mr. Wilson's electric car last week. Not the standard way, but it worked better. Mike studied the complex equation she'd created, so different from the textbook method but arriving at the same result. You know what, Sunshine? Sometimes the best solutions aren't in any manual. He pulled out his father's old photo album, the one he'd been avoiding since the crisis began. Inside, alongside snapshots of his dad fixing cars, was a collection of thank you notes spanning decades. People whose cars and lives his father had kept running through hard times. Your grandpa used to say that every car tells 2 stories, Mike explained, showing Sarah a yellowed photograph. The mechanical one, about what's broken and how to fix it, and the human one, about why that fix matters. Sarah traced the old photo with gentle fingers. Is that why you redesigned the mobile repair units? To tell both stories? Something like that. Mike smiled, remembering how his father would modify tools to work better for specific jobs. Sometimes you have to customize the solution to fit the problem. His phone buzzed. Elizabeth. Board reconvenes tomorrow at 9. Bring your best stories, both kinds. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Kevin stood on the porch, clearly nervous but determined. Mr. Thompson, remember how you said a good mechanic is born wanting to learn everything? Well, I think I found something in the original mobile unit design. For the next hour, they spread diagrams across the kitchen table while Sarah worked on her homework. Nearby, Kevin's fresh perspective highlighted details Mike had missed, possibilities he hadn't considered. If we combine your specialized unit's idea with these modifications, Kevin explained, growing more confident, we could actually increase efficiency while maintaining the personal touch. I ran the numbers. He produced a notebook full of calculations. Mike studied them, recognition dawning. These calculations, they're similar to what Sarah was doing with her math homework, coming at the problem from a different angle. That's what you taught us, Mr. Thompson. Sometimes you have to look at things differently to see the whole picture. Later that night, after Kevin left and Sarah went to bed, Mike walked into their garage. Unlike their old one, this space was pristine, organized, a gift from Elizabeth he'd initially felt uncomfortable accepting. But now he understood it wasn't just about having a nice garage. It was about having the right space to do important work. He opened his father's toolbox, now sitting proudly on a custom workbench. Inside, he found the old wrench that had started his journey in mechanics. Its worn surface told a story of countless fixes, of problems solved through persistence and creativity. Inspired, Mike began to work. He combined Kevin's insights with his own experience, Sarah's mathematical approach with his father's practical wisdom. By dawn, he had something new. A presentation that spoke both languages, corporate and community, efficiency and humanity. He was reviewing the final details when his phone buzzed again. A text from Pete. Heard about the project. Remember that transmission we couldn't fix with the manual method? Sometimes you have to write your own manual. Mike smiled, remembering that day. They'd eventually fixed the transmission by combining old-school knowledge with modern techniques. Just like he was doing now, Sarah found him in the garage, still working as morning light filtered through the windows. "Dad, you didn't sleep. Sometimes the best fixes take all night," he explained, showing her the presentation. "Want to check my math?" She settled beside him, her presence both comfort and inspiration. Together they refined the numbers, strengthened the logic, until both the mechanical and human elements sang in harmony. "It's like a bridge," Sarah observed, looking at the final product, "between the corporate way and your way." "Our way," Mike corrected, thinking of everyone who had contributed. Kevin's fresh perspective, Sarah's mathematical insight, his father's wisdom, Elizabeth's vision, even Harrison's challenges pushing him to be better. The morning sun caught the Chen Motors logo on his jacket hanging nearby. For the first time since the crisis began, it didn't feel like a costume he was trying to wear. Rather, it felt like a new tool in his box, one he was finally learning to use properly. Sarah hugged him before heading to get ready for school. "Dad, I'm proud of you. Not because you never fail, but because you always find a way to fix things. Even the scary corporate things." Out of the mouths of babes, Mike thought, reaching for his presentation with renewed confidence. Some fixes required more than just the right tools. They required the courage to bridge two worlds. The innovative design blueprint spread across the conference room's main screen, its clean lines and practical modifications drawing appreciative murmurs from the board members. Mike stood before them, his father's wrench in his pocket like a talisman, as he explained how his team had reimagined the mobile repair unit program. "The original design tried to be a Swiss Army knife," Mike began, his voice steady despite the stakes. "But any mechanic will tell you, specialized tools work better than universal ones. So we created 3 distinct units, each serving a specific community need." He clicked to the next slide, showing the first redesigned vehicle. "This is our emergency response unit, stripped down, focused on rapid deployment for stranded motorists. By removing the teaching station and specialized diagnostic equipment, we cut weight by 30% and reduced cost by 40% while improving response time." Harrison leaned forward, interest sparking in his usually skeptical eyes. "And the educational component? That's where this comes in." Mike revealed the second design, our mobile learning lab. Instead of trying to teach while doing emergency repairs, we created a dedicated space for community workshops, apprentice training, and public education about electric vehicles. It's already booked solid for the next 3 months with local schools and community colleges. Elizabeth smiled from her place at the table, recognizing the influence of Sarah's science fair project in the Learning Lab's layout. The board members were taking notes now, their earlier skepticism giving way to engagement. And the third unit, the community outreach vehicle. Mike pulled up the final design. This one's for scheduled maintenance, senior citizen services, and our reduced rate program. By specializing each unit, we actually increased efficiency while maintaining the personal connection that makes our program unique. He moved to the financial projections. Kevin Martinez, one of our apprentices, helped develop these numbers. By his calculations, which our finance team verified, the specialized units will reduce operational costs by 35%, while increasing community impact by 50%. Martinez, a board member, consulted her notes. The young man who helped identify the electrical flaw in the original design? The same. Mike felt a surge of pride. He's exactly what this program is about, combining fresh perspectives with solid engineering principles. In fact, he's already been offered a full-time position in our R&D department after he completes the apprenticeship. Harrison studied the cost-benefit analysis. These numbers are impressive, Thompson, but what about scalability, other facilities? This was the moment Mike had prepared for. He clicked to a map showing Chen Motors locations across the country. Each community has different needs, but they all share common threads. We've created a flexible implementation guide that allows each facility to customize their units while maintaining core standards. He showed them pilot programs already in development, rural communities needing mobile repairs for farm equipment, urban areas requiring rapid response units for commuter emergencies, suburban locations focusing on educational outreach. It's like a good tool set, Mike explained, patting his pocket where his father's wrench rested. The basics are the same, but how you use them depends on the job at hand. The presentation concluded with testimonials, not just from program participants, but from community leaders, local businesses, and partner organizations. The final slide showed a photo of Kevin teaching a group of high school students about electric vehicle technology, his face alight with the same passion Mike had seen in his own father years ago. When Mike finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then Elizabeth spoke. I believe Mr. Thompson has shown us something important here, not just about mobile repair units, but about how corporate efficiency and community impact can work together. The board's senior member, a woman who hadn't spoken during the entire crisis, finally leaned forward. My first car was a '65 Mustang. Local mechanic kept it running through college, charged what I could afford. Never forgot that kindness. She looked at her colleagues. Sometimes the best business decisions aren't just about numbers. The vote was unanimous. Not only would the program continue, but it would receive additional funding for expansion. Harrison even stayed behind to shake Mike's hand. I was wrong about standardization, he admitted. Your approach, it's different, but the results speak for themselves. As the room cleared, Elizabeth remained. You know what impressed them most? Not just the designs or the numbers, though those were excellent. It was seeing how you've built something that works on every level, mechanical, financial, and human. And Mike fingered the wrench in his pocket, thinking of all the lessons it represented. My father used to say that the best fixes last because they address the real problem, not just the symptoms. Smart man, Elizabeth smiled. Speaking of which, I believe Sarah has her regional science fair this weekend. Mike nodded, already imaging how he'd tell her about today's victory. Some successes meant more when shared with those who helped make them possible. The receipt from Giovanni's Italian restaurant sat beside Mike's empty plate, a simple artifact from an evening that felt anything but simple. Elizabeth sat across from him, her wheelchair positioned comfortably at the modified table she'd helped the restaurant design for accessibility. The candlelight softened her professional demeanor, bringing out the warmth in her eyes. So, she smiled, was it worth breaking your no fancy restaurants rule? Mike chuckled, thinking of their earlier conversation when he'd suggested Tony's pizza instead. Well, the garlic bread isn't quite Tony's, but I'll admit the view is better. He gestured to the cityscape twinkling beyond the window, then quickly added, "The whole view, I mean. The city and everything." Elizabeth's laugh was genuine, lacking the polished edge she used in board meetings. "Smooth recovery, Thompson. Though I like Tony's too. Sometimes a good pizza beats fine dining." It had been Sarah who finally pushed him to ask Elizabeth to dinner. "Dad," she'd said, with the exasperation only an 11-year-old could muster, "she's not just your boss anymore. And I saw how you looked at her during my science fair." The science fair, where Elizabeth had spent 2 hours asking Sarah detailed questions about her project, treating her not as an employee's daughter, but as a young scientist with valuable ideas. Where Mike had seen not the powerful CEO, but a woman who understood the importance of encouraging dreams. "Speaking of Sarah," Elizabeth said, as if reading his thoughts, "she mentioned wanting to start a STEM club at school. For girls interested in engineering." Mike nodded, warmth spreading through his chest at how naturally Elizabeth included Sarah in her thoughts. "She's already recruited 5 members. They're calling themselves the Future Fixers." "I love it." Elizabeth's eyes sparkled. "You know, I started something similar in college. Back then, they told me women didn't belong in engineering, let alone corporate leadership. That wheelchair you found me in that rainy day. I designed the motor system myself after my accident. Figured if I was going to need it, it should work exactly right. Is that why you understood about the mobile repair units? About making things work for specific needs?" "Partly." She reached across the table, her hand finding his. "But mostly I understood because I saw how you think about fixing things. Not just the mechanical part, but the human part too. It's rare." The waiter appeared with dessert, tiramisu to share, and placed the dish between them with 2 forks. Mike noticed how he'd quietly removed an extra chair earlier to make room for Elizabeth's wheelchair, without being asked. Little adjustments, made naturally with dignity, like Elizabeth herself made for others. "You know," Mike said, tasting the coffee-flavored dessert, "my father would have liked you. He believed in fixing things right, no matter what anyone else thought was standard procedure. I wish I could have met him." Elizabeth's voice was soft. "From everything you've told me, he helped shape the community program as much as any. In corporate policy, he did." Mike pulled out his father's old wallet, showing her a worn photo of his dad in front of his first repair shop. "Sarah keeps asking to hear stories about him, says she wants to understand where our fixing gene comes from." "Smart girl." Elizabeth smiled. "She gets that from both sides of her family tree, I'd say. Catherine must have been remarkable." Mike felt the familiar ache at his late wife's name, but it was gentler now, mixed with gratitude for the years they'd... And she was, and she would have appreciated how you've helped us. Not just with the job and the house, but with seeing possibilities we couldn't see ourselves. Their hands found each other again across the table. The restaurant had emptied around them, the night deepening beyond the windows, but neither moved. "To leave, Mike," Elizabeth said finally, "I don't want you to ever think what's growing between us. It's not because I feel obligated or... I know," he squeezed her hand, "just like I'm not here because you're my boss. We're here because sometimes the best connections aren't the ones we plan for. They're the ones that just work. Like a perfectly calibrated engine." Her eyes danced with amusement, "more like a custom modification." He grinned. Unexpected, but exactly right. The receipt lay forgotten as they talked into the night, sharing stories of fathers and mothers, dreams and setbacks, victories and losses. 2 people who had learned that fixing things, whether cars or companies or hearts, required both skill and understanding, both strength and gentleness. When Mike finally helped Elizabeth into her specialized car, their goodnight kiss felt as natural as completing a perfect repair, everything fitting exactly as it should, every part working in harmony with the others. "Next time," Elizabeth said, "let's do Tony's. Sarah can join us. I want to hear more about these future fixers." Mike watched her car disappear into the night, thinking how some of the best journeys start with a broken-down moment in the rain. The wedding ring nestled in Mike's pocket had been a collaboration of sorts. Sarah had helped design it, incorporating elements that honored both the past and future, a vintage setting from the same era as Catherine's ring, but holding a modern blue sapphire that matched Elizabeth's eyes. The jeweler had added subtle wheelchair accessibility symbols in the band's engraving, so delicate you had to know they were there to see them. "It's perfect, Daddy," Sarah had declared when they picked it up, "because it's not trying to replace Mum's ring. It's its own thing, but still connected to our history." Now, 6 months after that first dinner at Giovanni's, Mike stood in Elizabeth's private garage, putting the final touches on his proposal plan. She'd mentioned once that some of her happiest memories were of working on engines with her father before his passing. It had given Mike an idea. The restored 1965 Mustang gleamed under the garage lights, the same model Elizabeth had mentioned during his presentation to the board. He'd spent weeks tracking down the exact car, then months restoring it with help from his apprentices. Kevin had designed a custom hand control system that would allow Elizabeth to drive it independently. Sarah adjusted the bow on the hood one last time. "Remember, Dad, when she pulls in from her board meeting, I'll text you, then count to 50 before you come in." "Got it, sunshine." Mike smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. She'd thrown herself into planning this moment with the same dedication. She showed her science projects. "You're sure she'll say yes, Dad?" Sarah gave him her patented preteen eye roll. "She looks at you the way you look at perfectly restored engines. Plus, she already asked me if I'd be okay with having her as a stepmom." Mike's heart skipped. "She did? When?" "Last week at Future Fixers. We were talking about different kinds of families and how sometimes the best ones are custom-built." Sarah grinned. "Like our mobile repair units." The text came just as the sun was setting. Mike counted to 50, his father's old wrench in one pocket, for luck, the ring box in the other. When he entered the garage, Elizabeth was staring at the Mustang, her hand over her mouth. "Mike," her voice wavered, "is that the same model that got you through college?" He moved to her side, with some custom modifications. "Kevin helped design them. He's quite brilliant with adaptive technologies." Elizabeth wheeled closer, running her hand along the car's pristine surface. "It's exactly like Dad's, even the same shade of blue." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "How did you—" "Well, that's what we do, right? Fix things, solve problems, make things work better." Mike knelt beside her wheelchair. "Elizabeth, these past months, you've shown me that sometimes the best fixes aren't repairs at all. They're improvements, upgrades, new systems that work better than the old ones ever did." Sarah appeared silently in the doorway, giving him a thumbs up. Mike took the ring box from his pocket. "I'm not trying to replace what you had or what I had. I'm proposing something new, something custom-built for us, a family that honors our pasts while building a future together." He opened the box, revealing the ring. "Will you marry me?" Elizabeth traced the subtle engravings on the band, recognizing the accessibility symbols. "You included. You thought of everything." "He had help," Sarah chimed in, unable to contain herself any longer. "I picked the sapphire because it matches your eyes, and Dad suggested the vintage setting because beautiful things from different eras can work perfectly together," Elizabeth finished, tears flowing freely now. "Yes, Mike. Yes to marriage. Yes to our custom-built family. Yes to everything." The ring fit perfectly. They'd used the measurements from her wheelchair's hand controls to size it. Sarah rushed in for a group hug, and for a moment they just held each other, a new family configuration, falling into place like perfectly machined parts. "Want to take it for a spin?" Mike asked, nodding toward the Mustang. Kevin triple-checked all the adaptive controls. Elizabeth's smile lit up the garage. "Only if you both come with me. Every great journey needs a good crew." As they drove through the evening streets, Elizabeth handling the Mustang like she'd been born to it, Mike watched his daughter and fiancé sing along to the radio. Sarah had insisted on making a playlist for the occasion, mixing Elizabeth's Classical favorites with Catherine's beloved jazz standards and Mike's classic rock. The music blended perfectly, like their lives were learning to do. Different rhythms finding harmony, separate stories becoming a shared journey. His father had always said that the best repairs strengthen the whole machine, not just the broken part. Looking at his new family, Mike understood that love worked the same way. Not fixing what was broken, but building something stronger, something that carried the best of the past while embracing all the possibilities of the future. The new family portrait hung in Mike's office at Chen Motors, taken 1 year after that rainy Tuesday that had changed everything. In it, Sarah stood between Mike and Elizabeth, all three of them in matching Chen Motors polo shirts, their smiles genuine and bright. The photo had been taken at the grand opening of their 10th mobile repair unit facility, right after Sarah's speech about the Future Fixers program that was now spreading nationwide. "Mr. Thompson?" Jenny poked her head in. "The apprentice graduation ceremony starts in 20 minutes, and Mrs. Chen Thompson asked me to remind you about dinner with Pete tonight." Mike smiled at Elizabeth's new hyphenated name. She'd insisted on adding his, just as he'd insisted she keep hers. Equal partners. In everything. "Thanks, Jenny. Is Kevin ready for his keynote speech?" "Nervous, but prepared. He's wearing the tie you gave him." The ceremony space had been transformed from a standard corporate auditorium into something warmer, more personal. Photos of the graduating apprentices lined the walls, showing their journey from first-day nerves to confident completion. The mobile repair unit that Kevin had helped redesign stood proudly outside, its blue paint gleaming in the summer sun. Elizabeth wheeled up beside Mike's seat in the front row. Sarah perched next to her with a camera ready. "Remember when you worried you weren't qualified to run this program?" Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "Now look. 300 graduates across 10 facilities, and Kevin's been promoted to head of adaptive technology development." "We did good," Mike agreed, watching the graduates file in, their faces shining with pride. Many came from backgrounds, like his, people who needed a chance, who understood that fixing things was about more than just mechanics. Kevin approached the podium, adjusting the tie Mike had given him, the one that had belonged to Mike's father. "A year ago," he began, "I was a kid who took things apart to see how they worked. Today, thanks to this program, I'm an engineer who puts things together to help them work better." He smiled at Mike. "Someone taught me that the best mechanics aren't born knowing everything, they're born wanting to learn everything." After the ceremony, as families celebrated and pictures were taken, Sarah tugged on Mike's sleeve. "Dad, come see what Elizabeth and I made for you." They led him to his office, where a new display case had been installed. Inside, his father's old toolbox sat proudly in the center, restored but still bearing the marks of decades of use. Around it were photos, his father in his first shop, Mike at Pete's, Kevin teaching Sarah about engines, Elizabeth presenting their community program to international investors. "Look closer at the toolbox," Elizabeth encouraged. Mike opened it carefully. Inside, alongside his father's old tools, lay new ones, specialized instruments for electric vehicles, adaptive repair equipment, teaching tools for the next generation. And there, nestled in a custom holder, his father's wrench that had started it all. "We added something," Sarah said, pointing to a small engraving on the toolbox's lid. It read, "Thompson Family Legacy, fixing more than machines since 1963. The apprentices helped," Elizabeth added. "They wanted to honor where the program came from, even as we move into the future." Mike's vision blurred slightly. "It's perfect, just like this whole crazy year has been perfect." That evening, at Tony's Pizza, surrounded by the people who had been part of their journey, Pete teaching Sarah to make garlic knots, Mrs. Garcia sharing stories with Elizabeth about the old neighborhood, Kevin showing off his engagement ring. For his own upcoming wedding, Mike felt the kind of contentment that comes from knowing everything was running exactly as it should. "Penny for your thoughts?" Elizabeth asked, her hand finding his under the table. "Just thinking about that rainy Tuesday. Mike replied, about how sometimes the biggest fixes start with the smallest choices. Speaking of fixes, Sarah chimed in. Can I tell them our news now? Elizabeth nodded, her eyes twinkling. Sarah stood, commanding attention like the confident young woman she was becoming. Future Fixers just got approved for national expansion and... She paused dramatically. I'm going to be the youngest speaker at next month's Women in Engineering conference. The celebration that followed was pure Tony's style. Extra pizzas appearing mysteriously, neighbors dropping by to offer congratulations, community and family blending seamlessly together. Through it all, Mike watched his daughter and wife chatting animatedly about Sarah's upcoming speech, their shared passion for engineering bridging any gaps that might have existed between stepdaughter and stepmother. Later, driving home in Elizabeth's adapted Mustang, she insisted on taking it for all family outings. Mike thought about journeys, about how fixing a broken wheelchair had led to healing broken dreams, about how teaching others to repair engines had taught him to rebuild his own life. Sarah dozed in the back seat, her Future Fixer's notebook clutched to her chest. Elizabeth hummed along to one of Catherine's old jazz favorites, playing softly on the radio. And Mike Thompson, who had once thought his story was about endings, finally understood that it had always been about new beginnings.